On the 16th of December 1965, the Battle of the Bulge film was released on the occasion of the 21st anniversary of the battle. I suppose most of you will have seen it. There are some glaring inaccuracies, so much so that Eisenhower was outraged. Whereas the film clearly says at the end that it has tried to condense the battle and taken liberties with facts, there are those which could have been avoided, such as saying that the British 8th Army was to the north of the Ardennes. In fact, it was to the south, and more than 1,000 kilometres to the south at that, in Italy. Despite this, I think that most people put this film in their top 10 World War II films of all time. Before I continue with my video, I'll give you some information about the film you're actually seeing here. In view of all the copyright problems I'm now having with YouTube and other problems as well, I decided not to use anything from the 1965 film The Battle of the Bulge. I thought that maybe the trailer could be used, but then again I wasn't able to ascertain if this would result in problems for me or not. Therefore, what I'm showing you is scenes that I actually filmed from the same area that the battles actually took place in. This was filmed at the beginning of January 2017, so in a similar time to when the battle actually took place, and it's in similar conditions as well. It was pretty cold when I was there, but not as cold as it was during the actual battle in 1944-1945. If you're interested, I'll give you some links to where you can see the material in more detail that I filmed at that time. So why did the film revert to fictional characters when the real ones would have worked just as well? An article dated the 2nd of December 1965 in the Washington Post was the first to report that Dwight D. Eisenhower was outraged by this Warner Brothers movie. Indeed, he later had a press conference to say just what he thought of the film, which was not very complimentary. Let's bear in mind that many of the veterans were then still in their 40s, and people who were actually there are likely to get more upset than those who perhaps weren't, particularly if something is inaccurate. Columbia Pictures had been planning an epic about the battle, and it had the cooperation of the Defense Department as well as many of the generals who had been involved, including Eisenhower and Montgomery. The proposed title of Columbia's movie was 16th of December, The Battle of the Bulge. Michael Anderson was to direct from a screenplay written by Byron Morgan and Tony Lazzarino. The film was to be co-produced by Lazzarino and Kenneth T. Herc. The former president's son, John S. D. Eisenhower, was writing a companion history of the battle and was designated as technical advisor. Anderson was hoping to have Van Heflin as Eisenhower, David Niven as Montgomery, John Wayne as General George S. Patton, and Laurence Olivier as Adolf Hitler. I think you'd agree that this really is an all-star cast. Shortly after Columbia announced that filming would begin during the winter of 1964, Warner Brothers registered the title The Battle of the Bulge and announced that it was going to make its own fictional movie, upsetting the plans for Columbia's epic. Columbia obtained an injunction against Warner Brothers, dropping it after Warner Brothers agreed that its picture would not use the names of any of the real-life figures that had contributed to Columbia's project, such as Eisenhower, Montgomery, Omar Bradley, Anthony McAuliffe, Patton, and 10 other people. The Defense Department had also urged the Federal Trade Commission action against the movie on the grounds that its title was misleading. Even up to the date of the Warner Brothers release, Columbia intended to go ahead with filming. Filming was slated to begin at Camp Drum near Watertown in the state of New York in the autumn of 1966. This would have provided a more accurate backdrop to the geography of the Ardennes in 1944 rather than the Sierra north of Madrid. The weather was likely to be snow, and it was certainly forested rather than the somewhat bleak and sparse vegetation of the central Spanish countryside, which is instantly recognisable to all of us who have been there. However, filming in Spain did have the advantages of the Spanish army, which was happy to provide the many extras needed at a much lower price than it would have cost in the United States, as well as access to certain pieces of equipment which were of World War II vintage. To return to the subject of mistakes, there is of course the equipment, and that could start at the very beginning with the spotter plane, which we see Cessna L-19, which in reality did not fly for the first time until 1949. There are those that think that the German tanks are not realistic enough, as American tanks were used in lieu of King Tigers, for example, but to be quite honest, given the technology available at the time, they're as good as can be expected. And I don't think that we can expect the same degree of realism as we saw, for example, in Downfall nearly 40 years later. I also think that the thrust of the film showing that it was the shortage of fuel which led to the defeat is okay, but that's just my opinion. The final scene makes this quite clear, although it was on the 17th of December that the Wehrmacht came close to capturing the American supply dump at Spa. The final scene is a tank battle, which suggests that the Americans were deliberately sacrificing their tanks so that the Germans would run out of fuel. This could be seen to be perhaps the Battle of Celle, which was fought on the 26th of December 1944, but by then the Germans had run out of fuel anyway. Opinions, of course, are mixed, and there are those who may say, well, it's only a movie, but other people like me want accuracy. But anyway, write down what you think below. Warner Brothers did get some technical help on the film. Meinrad von Lauchert, formerly a major general in the Wehrmacht and participant in the Battle of the Bulge, advised on its production. With all of these problems, perhaps it's a pity that Warner Brothers beat Columbia to it. The alternative film never made it beyond the talking stage. Maybe Columbia felt that it could not compete with the Warner Brothers production. I'm going to leave the last word to Bosley Crowther, perhaps one of the most influential film critics of this time. When the Battle of the Bulge came out, he was then 60 years old, he was well known in the industry, and this is what he wrote in the New York Times. What is offensive about this picture, and offensive is the word, is the evident distortion of the material and of history to suit the wide cinema screen. For instance, it is the removal of the heavy fog that actually made it possible for the Germans to carry on their tank attacks without fear of retaliation from the air. This is a complete distortion of the weather conditions that made the battle what it was. It is a cruel deception to describe the climax of the Battle of the Bulge as a raging of German tanks against Americans across a broad plain in the manner of a Western movie cavalry and Indian charge. The film will be a likely irritation to those who have some sober, rueful sense of World War II, and also a respectful regard for the memory of the men who fought and died in the real Bulge. Looking back on this, with the benefit of 60 years, maybe it is rather a hard statement to make. But then again, maybe it isn't. What do you think? Write down your opinions below. This is slightly different to the normal sort of thing I do, but I think this is quite interesting. I had thought of saying my opinion on a couple of other films as well. The Great Escape and the Bridget Remagen. Of course, I have referred to Downfall many times as well in videos I have done. I upload every Friday at 2000 hours and sometimes at other times as well, particularly on anniversaries. So if you're interested to know more, then please subscribe. But for the moment, all the best from me, and bye for now.